My mom said, "Why would I invite you to Christmas? You're hardly family." So I dropped off her gift early, and what was inside shut everyone up. My name's Jason. I'm 28 years old, live in a small one-bedroom apartment outside Cincinnati, and I work full-time as an IT specialist for a hospital chain. Nothing glamorous, just steady work, a quiet life, and a fridge full of leftovers. The kind of life where you go home tired, flip on a lamp, and stare at the walls in silence for a while before remembering to eat. But I didn't always live alone. This story starts with a phone call I thought was going to be simple, me asking my mom what time Christmas dinner was this year. It had become kind of a tradition. Not Christmas dinner itself. No, I hadn't actually been invited to one of those in almost 5 years, but the call. Every December, I'd call and ask. She'd dodge, or lie, or say it was just a small gathering this year. Or, "Oh, we assumed you were working." This year, though, she didn't dodge. She answered, let out this fake surprised laugh, and said, "Why would I invite you to Christmas? You're hardly family." That word, hardly, stuck in my teeth like a shard of glass. I didn't know what to say at first. I just stared at the kitchen counter, one hand still resting on the coffee mug I'd just poured. I called because I thought, maybe this year would be different. Maybe I'd finally earn my way back in. But my mom? She made it sound like I'd never been in to begin with. Let me rewind for a second. If you're wondering what I did to deserve that kind of coldness, I wish I could tell you something dramatic, something scandalous. But honestly, I was just born second. I have an older sister, Danielle. She's 2 years older than me, works in PR, married to a guy who sells insurance, has 2 kids, a Range Rover, and every family photo in our mom's living room has her face front and center like she's the poster child for success. Growing up, I learned early that the house didn't have space for 2 golden children. When Danielle got a B on a test, my mom blamed the teacher. When I got an A-, she'd ask why it wasn't higher. Danielle wrecked her first car at 17, texting while driving. My mom cried and said it was trauma. When I asked if I could get a second-hand car for college, I was told, some of us have to learn responsibility the hard way. By 19, I was working 2 jobs and living out of my buddy's basement. No going-away dinner. No care package. Just a quick hug, a quiet be safe, and the front door shutting behind me. Even then, I still called home. Still tried to show up for birthdays, bring gifts, check in. But it always felt off. Like I was a guest who overstayed his welcome in someone else's family. That December phone call was different though. She didn't make excuses. She didn't pretend. She just told the truth, her truth, that I wasn't really part of them anymore. That I'd been hard to love, in her words. That she couldn't have tension at the dinner table with the grandkids around. That maybe I'd be happier doing something else. I didn't argue, didn't push. I just said, all right, I hear you. Then I hung up, sat down at my kitchen table, and stared at the wall for a long time. I don't know how long. Eventually, the silence just started to sound normal. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to let it in like this. Not this year. If I wasn't welcome at the table, I'd still send a gift. One final gift. But not the kind you wrap in shiny paper or stuff with glittery tissue. This would be something else entirely. Something that had been waiting in the shadows for years, buried under dust and silence and denial. Because a week later, while looking for an old phone charger in the back of my closet, I came across a cardboard box I hadn't opened since I moved into this apartment. Inside it, a sealed envelope I didn't even realize I still had. It was from my grandmother, and the name on the front was mine. When I saw that envelope again, I froze. I remembered the handwriting immediately, my grandmother's. Sharp, clean cursive. The kind of penmanship that made even a grocery list feel like a formal letter. She died 7 years ago. Her funeral was the last time I remember all of us being in the same room, without someone faking a smile. My mom had barely cried. Danielle had cried enough for all of us. And me? I just stood there, watching them both, trying to figure out if I even belonged. This envelope, though, it brought something back. Back then, I remember Grandma pulling me aside during one of our last visits. She was in her old recliner, wearing that sky blue sweater she never went anywhere without. She said, "There's something I want to give you, but not yet. One day, when you're ready." I never knew what she meant. Turns out, she meant this letter. I opened the flap carefully, like I was afraid the ink would vanish if I looked too fast. Inside was a 3-page letter, all in that same steady handwriting, all written like she knew no one else would ever see it. The letter started simple enough. "If you're reading this, Jason, then I didn't get the chance to give it to you myself. But I want you to know something I never said out loud. I saw you. I saw the way they treated you. I saw the way they dismissed you, overlooked you, blamed you. And I know you never said anything, because you were afraid they'd say you were just being dramatic. You were never dramatic. You were surviving." I paused, took a breath. The rest of the letter changed everything. She explained how years ago, When she was updating her will, she had quietly decided to leave me her house. Not Danielle. Not my mom. Me. Her exact words were, "You were the only one who ever visited me without needing something. You never made me feel like a burden." She said she gave a copy of the legal change to her lawyer, but also made a backup for me, just in case she didn't trust how things might go. There was also something else in the envelope. A small, smooth metal key. At first, I didn't understand what it was for. Then I flipped the letter over and saw one last line scribbled in pen. Safety deposit box number 118, Westbrook Bank. Ask for Helen. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I just sat there at the table with that letter, rereading every word, wondering how deep this thing went. I kept thinking back to her funeral. Back then, my mom had told everyone the house was hers. Said grandma left it to her because it was the natural choice. I never even questioned it. I just assumed it made sense. But now I realized something strange. Right after the funeral, my mom moved into grandma's house within 2 weeks. Like she'd been waiting for the moment. Danielle helped her redecorate the place. They changed the wallpaper, painted the front door a modern red, got rid of grandma's flower bed, and replaced it with gravel. They never asked if I wanted anything. Not even her books. She used to read to me when I was a kid. Danielle never cared for reading. But now it made sense. They didn't ask me because they didn't think it was mine. Or worse, they knew and just didn't care. The next morning, I called Westbrook Bank. "Hi, I'm calling to check if you still have a deposit box under the name Eleanor Grant." There was a pause on the other end. Then the woman said, "We do? And actually, your name is listed as a secondary access holder." My stomach turned. I scheduled a visit that Friday. And when I walked into that bank, gave them my ID, and handed over the little key, I was shaking, but not from fear. It was something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Not the loud, angry kind. Not revenge fantasy stuff. Just the quiet kind that comes from finally having the truth. They led me to a little private room. Brought out a long, steel box. When I opened it, there were 3 things inside. A manila folder with legal documents. Copies of the official will and property transfer forms, dated and notarized. A flash drive in a clear plastic bag. A note that said, "If they lie, play this." I didn't even know what I had yet, but I knew one thing. I was no longer going to accept being told I was hardly family. Because now I had proof that I was the only one grandma trusted. And I wasn't going to waste it. I didn't plug in the flash drive right away. It sat on my kitchen counter for nearly 2 days. Every time I walked by it, I felt this pressure in my chest, like whatever was inside would either make everything crystal clear or break something that couldn't be fixed. But I finally did. Late Sunday night, I slid the drive into my laptop, opened the only folder inside, and found 3 video files. They were time-stamped about a month before my grandmother passed. Each one started the same way, with her sitting in her recliner, talking to the webcam like it was me. And in each one, she told a different truth. In the first video, she looked tired but clear-eyed. Her voice was soft. "If your mother or Danielle ever try to contest this, play this for them." She explained how she changed her will quietly after overhearing a phone call between my mom and Danielle. They were talking about splitting the house after she passed, talking like it was already theirs. My mom even joked about converting the guest room into an Airbnb. "I was right there," she said in the video. "I was in the kitchen. They didn't know I could hear them." Her voice got quieter, more bitter. That house was never a prize. It was a place full of memory and care. And they talked about it like it was some cash-in investment. Then came the part that cracked something open inside me. "You were the only one who came to see me every month. Not out of obligation, but because you wanted to. You shoveled my driveway. You fixed that loose cabinet. You brought groceries when your mother said she was too tired. I may not have said it back then, but I loved you for that. I still do." She smiled at the camera. That soft, wrinkled smile I hadn't seen in years. And then she said the part that changed everything. "If they're watching this now, it means they tried to take what was yours. So here it is, for the record. I left the house to Jason. No one else." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something between anger and clarity. I hadn't imagined the way they treated me. I hadn't been too sensitive or dramatic. They'd all gaslit me for years. And now I had proof. But I wasn't interested in courtroom fights or family screaming matches. No, I wanted something quieter, smarter, something they couldn't argue with. I took a week to think it through. I visited the house once during that time. Drove past it at night. They'd strung lights on the porch rail. Danielle's kids' stockings were visible through the front window, hanging on the fireplace where Grandma used to keep her porcelain angel. It was surreal seeing it like that. Like a museum someone had vandalized and called home. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, engine running, thinking about everything they took and everything I was about to take back. That's when I knew what I was going to do. I wasn't going to show up on Christmas Day. That would make it about me. Would give them a stage for more lies, more guilt-tripping, more manipulation. Instead, I'd give them a gift. I spent 3 days preparing it. Bought a velvet-lined gift box. Printed clean copies of the will. Burned the 3 videos onto a custom-labeled DVD that read, "For the truth." I wrote a short note by hand. To the real owner of 1426, Oak Ridge Lane. Merry Christmas. You forgot someone. Then, as a final touch, I added a framed photo from 10 years ago, me and Grandma, sitting in her garden. She was holding my hand. I was laughing. On December 23rd, I dropped it off on their porch at 7:12 a.m., before the sun came up. Quiet. No confrontation. No warning. I didn't even knock. Christmas Eve came and went without a word. No call. No text. No passive-aggressive group message from Danielle with 20 photos of the table settings and hashtags like #BlessedFamily or #FirstSnow. Nothing. I didn't check my phone much. Didn't want to. I spent the evening watching old movies in silence with a warm blanket and a beer, wondering if maybe they hadn't even opened the gift yet. Part of me thought they'd ignore it, toss it in a closet unopened, or assume it was some sad, last-ditch attempt to get attention. But deep down, I knew better. My mom's curiosity was stronger than her coldness. Christmas morning, 10:46 a.m. My phone buzzed, and kept buzzing. By 11:15, I had 47 missed calls. 10 from my sister, 7 from my mom. The rest from numbers I didn't recognize, probably cousins, uncles, the neighbor with too much time on her hands. I didn't answer any of them. I just watched the screen flash and fade. And then came the voicemail. It was Danielle. Her voice was ragged, like she'd either been crying or screaming, or both. "Jason, what the hell did you do? Mom is losing it. You had no right, to do this on Christmas. The whole family's here. You embarrassed her. You ruined everything. Call me back. Fix this. Please. Before we do something we all regret." She hung up with this half-sob, half-scoff sound. It didn't even sound like her. It sounded like someone who just got caught red-handed and hadn't figured out which lie to go with yet. It took a few more calls before I figured out what actually happened. A friend of mine, Trevor, married into our extended family. He was there that morning. He sent me a text around 2 p.m. that just said, "Dude, you dropped a nuke. Your mom opened the box on video." Apparently, my cousin Amanda had been filming a cute gift opening montage for TikTok. She had no idea she was about to capture the exact second the lies unraveled. Here's how Trevor described it to me, in detail. My mom opened the gift slowly, probably expecting something harmless. Maybe socks, or cookies, or something she could fake smile about before shoving it in a drawer. Then she saw the envelope. She opened it, pulled out the printed will. Read the name. Stopped. Danielle leaned over to look, snatched it out of her hand. Then the USB. Then the DVD. She flipped the photo over, saw the note on the back. And that's when my mom said it. Loud. Sharp. Like a whip crack across the whole room. "That little bastard doesn't know what he's talking about." Everyone froze. And someone, not sure who, asked, "Wait, what is that?" My mom muttered something about old paperwork and outdated nonsense. But Amanda, who was still filming, said something like, "This looks pretty official." Then, because chaos loves a crowd, my cousin's husband grabbed his laptop and said, "Let's just see what it says." He plugged in the DVD, hit play, and the living room filled with the sound of my grandmother's voice. I don't know exactly what happened after that. Only fragments from what Trevor described. Screaming. Accusations. Danielle yelling at my mom, asking if she really knew all along. My uncle asking why the will had never come up during probate. People walked out. At some point, someone flipped the table. The room turned into a courtroom with no judge, just 20 different witnesses trying to figure out who to believe. But they all heard her. They heard my grandmother say, "If you're watching this now, it means they tried to erase him." And that was it. That was the nail in the coffin. The point of no return. I didn't reply to any of their messages. I didn't answer the door when Danielle showed up the next morning and knocked for 15 minutes straight. I just sat in my apartment, poured myself a glass of cold orange juice, and stared at my phone. It never stopped buzzing. But in that moment, it didn't feel like noise anymore. It felt like proof that I'd finally been heard. By New Year's, the phone had finally gone quiet. The messages slowed from panic to bitter. From "please call me" to "what you did was disgusting." Danielle sent one last Hail Mary around January 2nd. "You knew what this would do. You had your little revenge moment. Congratulations. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and letting the truth walk into their house like a ghost they'd buried and forgotten about. On January 3rd, I scheduled a meeting with my grandmother's old estate attorney, Mitchell Harris. He still had an office in downtown Cincinnati. Quiet, modest, walls lined with dark wood shelves and a bowl of those strawberry-wrapped hard candies that never seemed to exist outside old people's offices. He remembered me instantly. "Jason Grant," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "You look just like her." I handed him the will copies, the DVD, and the bank documents. By the time I finished explaining, he just sighed and said, "I always wondered why no one followed up. I should have pushed harder." I asked him what my legal options were. He didn't sugarcoat it. Technically, it was fraud. If your mother claimed ownership of that house without executing the actual will and misled the probate court, it's a serious offense. I asked what would happen if I wanted it back. "We can file a quiet title action," he said. "It'll take a little time. But with this evidence, you have a real case. And they know it." By January 12th, the first letter was sent. A formal notice of ownership challenge. It was polite, legal, precise, and it landed like a lightning strike. 3 days later, Danielle showed up outside my apartment again, this time with her husband. They buzzed the intercom 6 times. I didn't answer. She left a note under my door. "You're punishing us for Mom's mistake. You don't have to go through with this." That word, punishing, stuck with me, because it told me everything I needed to know. They still didn't see it. They didn't see that I wasn't burning their house down. I was just turning on the lights. Mitchell filed the claim in probate court the following week. The court gave them 60 days to respond. In that time, I didn't speak a word to them. I let the papers do the talking. And quietly, behind the scenes, something started shifting. Danielle and her husband began packing. A few boxes at first, then furniture. Then the porch light went out. One evening in early March, I drove past the house again. A moving truck sat outside. It was nearly dark, but through the front window, I could see my mother standing in the hallway, just standing there, holding something. Maybe a vase. Maybe a picture frame. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just didn't look. But for the first time, she looked small. Not cruel. Not commanding. Just small. And I knew it was done. 2 weeks later, the house was empty. Keys were returned. Mitchell called me on a Wednesday morning and said, "It's yours. No court appearance needed." They didn't contest it. I didn't celebrate. Didn't post about it. Didn't pop a bottle of champagne. I just drove there after work, stood in front of the door, and let my hand rest on the doorknob for a long time before opening it. The inside still smelled faintly like cinnamon and pine cleaner. The furniture was gone, but I didn't need it. I walked room by room, touching the walls, the windowsills, the pantry where my grandmother used to keep a hidden stash of jelly beans for emergencies. And in the back room, her room, I found the one thing they'd left behind. A box of books, all hers. And on top, a folded note, my name written on it. It said, "If you're reading this in here, then I did something right. Welcome home, sweetheart." I didn't move in right away. At first, I just came by on weekends. Fixed what was broken. Repainted the walls. Took down the cheap plastic blinds Danielle had put up and replaced them with Grandma's old lace curtains I found sealed in a box in the attic. It wasn't about turning the house into a monument. It was about returning it to something honest. Real. Every change I made was quiet. Measured. No drama. No gloating. But each time I stood in that house, I felt the noise in my head get quieter. Like I was slowly rewiring something that had been broken for a long time. One morning, while sorting through old boxes in the closet of what used to be my grandmother's sewing room, I found a thin black binder labeled, "Letters, not mailed." Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, all addressed to me. None of them had ever been sent. Some were short, "Miss you today. Hope work's okay." Some were long, 4 or 5 pages, telling stories about when I was little. How I used to line up all her jam jars like trophies after helping in the garden. How she once caught Danielle blaming me for something she did, and didn't speak to my mother for 3 days afterward. But there was one letter, dated only a week before she passed, that struck me like a punch to the chest. "Jason, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. And if you're reading it in this house, then you found the truth. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I'm sorry I stayed silent when they made you feel small. But I need you to know something important. You were always the kind one. That mattered more than anything. And I hope when this place is yours, you use it the way I did, to make people feel welcome. Not controlled. Not judged. Just seen." I didn't cry. Not because I was trying to be strong, but because it felt like something in me had already made peace. The neighborhood changed after that. People who hadn't spoken to me in years started waving again. The older lady across the street, Mrs. Patel, brought over samosas and asked how the inside looked now that those other two moved out. I laughed for the first time in months. One day, the mailman, same guy from my childhood, stopped and said, "Glad you ended up here. Always figured it was yours anyway." And here's the part one never told anyone, until now. About a month after I moved in, I got a certified letter addressed to my mom from the local property assessor's office. It had accidentally been sent to the house. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Inside was a copy of an application my mother filed 3 years ago, trying to claim survivorship ownership of the house by altering the original deed. Forgery. A quiet little lie wrapped in legal language. I took it to Mitchell. He shook his head and said, "You could press charges. That's not a clerical mistake. That's felony territory." But I didn't. I let it go. Because truth isn't about punishment. It's about peace. And I'd finally found mine. The last time I saw my mom was on the sidewalk outside a grocery store a few blocks from her new apartment. She looked surprised to see me. Said nothing. I nodded once. She nodded back. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. But it wasn't bitter. It was clean. So yeah, I wasn't invited to Christmas. And I don't expect to be ever again. But that's okay. Because this house, this peace, it was never about the invitation. It was about realizing I didn't need one to begin with. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day. And trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.